drones that were launched by Houthi forces in Yemen. This action was a demonstration of the integrated air and missile defense architecture that we have built in the Middle East and that we are prepared to utilize whenever necessary to protect our partners and our interests in this important region.
Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder said it's unclear what the missiles were targeting, but said they were launched, quote, potentially toward targets in Israel. Ryder also said there were no casualties to U.S. forces or any civilians that they are aware of. Truckloads of humanitarian aid are getting ready to enter Gaza as the border is expected to reopen tomorrow. This comes as Israel tells troops to get ready for the ground offensive.
They always have.
Humanitarian aid is ready to get into the Gaza Strip from Egypt as the Rafah crossing is expected to reopen by Friday. Israel on Wednesday agreed to allow up to 20 trucks to pass through at the urging of President Biden. The World Health Organization said 5 of its trucks carrying medical supplies are waiting at the Rafah crossing.
Our trucks are loaded and ready to go. We're working with Egypt and Palestine Red Crescent societies to deliver our supplies into Gaza as soon as the Rafah crossing is opened, hopefully tomorrow.
More than 100 trucks have been waiting at the border since the war began. More aid is arriving in Egypt, including over 30 tons from Venezuela and 27 tons from Russia. U.S. President Biden has also pledged $100 million worth of humanitarian aid to Gazans through international organizations. But the State Department expressed concern Thursday.
So Hamas may try to divert this assistance and keep it from getting to the civilians who it is intended for. We think that's a legitimate concern. We've made clear that this aid needs to go to innocent civilians and not Hamas. We're going to be watching very carefully how it's delivered because we want to be sensitive to those concerns, which we share.
This comes as Israel gets ready for the ground offensive into the Gaza Strip. Israel's defense minister met with soldiers stationed near the border with Gaza on Thursday, telling them the battle will be lengthy and difficult.
Get organized. Be ready. The order will come. Thank you so much. Guys, we trust you. Good luck, and we'll meet again. Whoever sees Gaza from outside now will see it from the inside. I promise you. That's a promise.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also addressed soldiers near the border with Gaza. Tens of thousands of Israeli troops have been massed along the border with Gaza since the war began on October 7th.
The entire state of Israel stands behind you, and we will give the hard blow to our enemies so that we achieve victory. For victory. Are you ready?
And along the border with Lebanon, Israeli troops continue to exchange fire with the Hezbollah terrorist group backed by Iran. Hezbollah said its rockets hit several Israeli military targets, and Israel reported 3 injuries. Elsewhere in the region, drone attacks intensified against U.S. forces. A base in Syria hosting U.S. troops was targeted by 2 drones Thursday morning, causing minor injuries. Another drone attack was reported on the same day at a base hosting U.S. forces in Iraq. Thursday's attack is the third in less than 24 hours against air bases which house U.S. troops in Iraq. U.S. authorities have also issued a global travel warning for all Americans, citing increased tensions around the world. It says to be extra cautious in tourist areas. As of Thursday, over 5,100 people have died in the war between Israel and Hamas. They include nearly 3,800 people in Gaza. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed, mostly in the initial attack. The Israeli military updated the number of people believed to have been taken hostage to 206. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
Starbucks
long documented history of Hamas, the so-called Gaza Health Ministry, which is the Hamas Health Ministry, doctoring numbers and mostly focusing on embedding combatants and transforming them into teenagers or just men a certain military age that died while they were peacefully in their homes, and all kinds of other lies. Everything that comes from the Gaza Strip should be treated with extreme caution. And I think that's a wise practice for any source of information. I know that when we report something, we are scrutinized and we are asked to provide evidence for our claims. And that's right. That's how it should be. I think that too many times international media gives Hamas a free ride and doesn't hold them to half of the scrutiny that we and others have to go through.
And what about the hostages being held in Gaza? What is the IDF doing to try and rescue them?
We are collecting intelligence at all levels. We're pooling the resources that we have in the state of Israel, not only the IDF, but all of the other intelligence organizations that we have. There is a special national task force which directs the activities. We're collecting information, coming up with a plan, and we have said extremely clearly, we will not rest until all of them are brought back home. That is our commitment. That is our responsibility and duty.
NTD's Tiffany Meyer there, speaking to Israel Defence Forces spokesperson Jonathan Kamrukas. London's Metropolitan Police hopes cutting-edge facial recognition technology could be the game changer in its fight against shoplifting. The police force has used the system to identify nearly 150 prolific shoplifters. Its trials show the tech is highly accurate and can even recognise people with masks.
Britain's biggest police force is using facial recognition technology to catch prolific shoplifters. The Metropolitan Police said the new software is game-changing and could revolutionise how they investigate and solve crime.
So there's a number of things we're looking for. One is to be much more responsive to the needs of the retail industry in a way that actually allows us to sort out the most prolific and most harmful offenders and be able to tackle them and take them off the street.
The Met Police asked 12 retailers to provide images of 30 of the worst offenders who steal from their shops in a pilot of the new software. They were compared against the force's custody shots, and of 302 images submitted, 149 came up as positive matches. Those matches are now being investigated further with a view to building criminal cases.
What this does is this gives us a match on the system that gives us a jump-off point at an early stage so we can then start to progress an investigation and build a case around that individual.
The Met Police found the majority involved in prolific shoplifting are career criminals who are also involved in serious crimes. Lindsay Chiswick, National Police
We're not the only ones.
Said the algorithm has been independently tested by the National Physical Laboratory.
And with this technology we've been talking about today, it's an algorithm that we've independently tested through the National Physical Laboratory. So we have assurance it's 100% accurate when it comes to retrospective usage, and we understand how it works.
The new system can use images from CCTV, dash cams, doorbell cameras or phones. It uses the same algorithm as the Met's live facial recognition technology. Chiswick said the software uses biometric measures of a person's face and works even if part of their face is covered. It takes around 60 seconds to find a match.
How biometric matching works is it creates biometric templates. That's essentially measurements of the face. So it doesn't matter skin colour, it doesn't matter distinguishing features, it's the measurements of the face, and that's called a biometric template.
Around 50,000 shoplifting incidents were reported to the Met last year. The actual
Dinesh, you just said that, they're making lists. There is no doubt that you and I are on those lists. There's just no doubt. And the issue is that anyone who cares about liberty, who cares about freedom, who cares about truth, who cares about unborn lives, you're on these lists. And if you folks do not participate in undoing the evil that has been done, in restoring the freedoms that have been lost, you will lose your freedoms. There's no doubt about it. I've been talking about this incessantly wherever I go, and you have made a film that makes it very, very clear. This is happening now. The FBI and others are making lists. They're going after people. They're threatening people. And unless we stop them, it's going to only get worse.
Yes. Now, stopping them involves a bunch of things. It involves working through institutions that have the power to block and roll back the police state. Of course, the courts, the Supreme Court is one of them. The House GOP needs to do its job, but there's a lot of power we also have in the states, governors, the attorneys general, secretaries of state. And so we need to mobilize through our elected representatives and using our institutions to push back on the police state. There are things we can do individually. I mean, sign up to be a poll watcher or a poll observer. So there are individual things we can do, but we also have to work together and through our institutions and use our power to restrict and then defeat this police state.
And that's the thing, is that everyone has to be involved. And again, I can't say this enough, folks. It's like being in, in the revolution or in the Civil War. This is the third existential crisis of our nation. We've not seen anything like this since the Civil War or since the revolution, where everything we hold dear, everything that makes us this nation called America, is under siege. This film makes it crystal clear. Nobody dreamt we could be here so quickly. We could lose our freedoms so quickly. And if you're not involved somehow, you are complicit. And that's what I want to say, especially to anybody who dares say, oh, I'm a Christian. If you're a Christian, you have an obligation before God to stand up against evil, to speak out against evil, to be a voice for the voiceless. Those who are rotting in jail because of January 6th and innumerable others depend on those of us who have a voice and who have freedom. Dinesh, less than a minute left. What else can we say?
Well, when the jaws of a police state slam shut, you made this point a little earlier, there's not a whole lot you can do. We show in the film a refugee from North Korea, and what she says is at some point, all you can do is run. I mean, you have to get out, you have to get your family out, try to get your money out. It's too late, but we haven't gotten there yet. And so there are a lot of things we can do and must do. And so this film, in that sense, is not a film I wanted to make, because I never wanted America to be a place where a film like this needed to be made. But alas, it does. And so policestatefilm.net is the place to go. See it in the theater if you can. I don't think you'll be quite the same after that.
Has caused the company irreparable harm. This is the Union's Post. It depicts a bulldozer ripping down the fence that separates the Gaza Strip and Israel. Hamas had broken through the fence earlier this month as part of its massacre of 1,400 Israelis. Most of those killed by the terrorists were civilians, including babies, women, and the elderly. The union, called Starbucks Workers United, wrote "Solidarity with Palestine" at the top of the Post. It has since been taken
got
down.
that fist
Starbucks
in there
issued a
too.
statement saying that it unequivocally condemns the recent acts of terrorism and disagrees with the views expressed by the union. Starbucks is suing the union over its use of the Starbucks name and logo, which the company says has caused people to associate the Post.
Brigitte, we have imported millions of Muslims into the country, and it seems as if they are not assimilating. Look at what happens in Minneapolis with the Somali Muslim population. Why is that, Brigitte Gabriel? Why is it that the Arab Muslim immigrants to America seem resistant to assimilating to Western values?
Well, the world is changing. Remember, the Arabs and Muslims who immigrated from the Middle East prior to 9/11, prior to 2001, assimilated just fine. We started seeing the radicalization of the Islamic world after the Iranian mullahs came to power in 1979. That's when we started seeing a true rise of radical Islamism worldwide. So right now, since 2000, we started seeing all the imams that are preachers in mosques in the United States being imported from places like Egypt, like Syria, like Afghanistan, like Pakistan, who are coming to America and being more radical than the generation before them. And so when you end up bringing now big blocks from the Islamic world who did not come here because they were so tired of the corruption in their states, they wanted freedom, they wanted a civilized society, those are the original Muslims who used to immigrate here. Right now, when you import a group of people as refugees, refugees because you want to help them and bring them in mass by the tens of thousands, there is no possible way you can assimilate them. And that's why they regroup together. For example, you mentioned the Somali community. We didn't bring them all to Minnesota. We actually scattered them all over the country. They ended up, people who we settled in Tennessee, driving back up to Minnesota because they heard that's where their clan or their tribe or a bunch of Somalis are. And then they group together, and that's where you see radicalism fester. And that's why we had 42 terrorists from the Somali community in Minnesota go to the Middle East and fight with the radical Islamists in the Middle East. Actually, the first American suicide bomber was a Somali American who became a suicide bomber. So it is a problem, and that's why we do not want to import Palestinian refugees into the country. No way in any shape or form. I encourage people to go to our website, actforamerica.org, actforamerica.org. We have a petition, a whole campaign directed to Congress right now. We do not want one Palestinian refugee settled in the United States. They destroy everywhere they go. They create problem. The Arabic countries do not want them, and we do not want them either. Go to actforamerica.org and take action today.
Brigitte, in all of your work of doing this for the last couple of decades, what do you think is one of the great misconceptions people have about Islam? You touched on this a little bit in the first segment, but you say that the peaceful majority is actually not the operative way to look at this, that there's actually a violent, radical minority that then governs the peaceful majority. But even, Brigitte, I look at some of these public approval polls of what actually rank-and-file Muslims believe in some of these countries, and it's shocking. What is the one thing that you want our audience to know, the American people to know, that is a, let's just say, a misconception that people have about Islam in America or worldwide? Brigitte Gabriel, about a minute and a half remaining.
Again, in all religions, you have people who are radical and you have people who do not adhere to the religion as much. In Islam is the same thing. Those who adhere to Islam, look, we have Americans in America who are members of the Nation of Islam, can't even read Arabic, have never read the Quran in Arabic. They have no idea what the people who adhere to the Islamic Ummah believe. But what you have to understand is Islam by itself is a political doctrine. It's not a religion like Judaism and Christianity. And that's why majority of the people identify with the Islamic Ummah, the Islamic nation. That's why you see more similarity and loyalty between a Muslim in Khartoum and a Muslim in America who feels closer to a Muslim in America than he feels to a Christian in Khartoum. And because of the radicalism in the doctrine itself. So while most Muslims are peaceful, the doctrine itself is a violent ideology calling for the killing and being at war with the non-Muslim land until eternity.
Brigitte Gabriel, you always tell it like it is. Plug the website one more time, about 30 seconds. Plug anything you want. 30 seconds remaining.
We are in a fight for our survival. This is barbarism versus civilization. This is democracy versus dictatorship. This is evil versus goodness. Go to actforamerica.org. Join us. Sign up to get our emails and action alert. And make sure you sign our petition to stop any Palestinians from coming into the country and expel Rashida Tlaib from Congress.
Get repatriated, right? So why has the Palestinian refugee population grown? And it's because UNRWA uses a different definition for what constitutes a refugee. They pass on refugee status to the offspring, to the descendants of anyone who fled or was forced out of the region. So that means if a Palestinian left the region, went to Jordan, obtained citizenship in Jordan, and has a kid, that kid is still considered a refugee according to UNRWA. Not only that, but the Palestinians who live in the West Bank and Gaza, who are descendants of those refugees who I guess were in that region, right? They are still considered refugees, even though they're under the governance of the Palestinian Authority. They're in their homes. They're in what would be a future Palestinian state. So whether or not they're in a camp, if they have a descendant, or if they are, probably 73 years old now or something, and they are from that region and moved, I guess, from the war, they're still considered a refugee. It's bonkers.
Well, that sounds pretty bizarre. I mean, I guess a couple thoughts is, why would the United Nations do that? And what does it mean for the narrative on the crisis of Palestinians?
Exactly. I think the biggest reason that it does this is for the money, right? I mean, when you have an agency set up and its only reason for existence is to serve a population, and it's only one population, if that population goes away, if they resettle this population, which is the goal of every single other refugee group, right? That's dealt with by the UNHCR. They try to settle them. If the Palestinians were resettled into new countries, UNRWA would disappear. It would have no reason for existence, and it receives billions of dollars, right? And it's so corrupt and incredibly anti-Semitic. There was a brilliant report that came out years ago by Phil Neuer of UN Watch, and he found that over 120 teachers at UNRWA schools, because they employ mostly Palestinians, including some members of Hamas, and he found that many of these teachers, over 120 of them, were teaching vicious anti-Semitism, including glorifying Hitler, teaching that violent resistance against Jews is necessary. And then you have all of the scandals with nepotism and sexual conduct and using funds for personal business trips. I mean, this is why Trump cut funding to this agency in 2018, and Biden started it up again.
We got about 30 seconds left, but I'm curious, I mean, do we know what the number of Palestinian refugees would be if they weren't playing with the numbers like this?
Yeah, there was a leaked document that came out some years ago, a U.S. official government document, and I think it estimated the number to be anywhere from around 14 to 20,000, and that's about right. If you imagine that there's 400 to 750,000 that fled, and you can sit there and crunch the math yourself, then that is an inappropriate number. And yet the world is so obsessed with these Palestinian refugees and don't even think why a refugee population would be increasing over the years and not decreasing when the war happened 75 years ago.
Jeez, well,